Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Technically Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Megan, and as always, I'm with my co-host, John. And today we have a special guest, Desiree. Welcome to Technically Speaking. So just to begin, could you tell us and the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So what I do is I own a company that does customized training. So that's anything from instructor-led training to, documentation to e-learning. So we work with a lot of tech companies to do technical writing and kind of put together some of that language and information. And then we do a lot in the e-learning side of it. I kind of got started. I don't even know how I got started sometimes, actually, if I'm being honest. I mean, I fell into it. The best way to describe it is that I fell into it. I went to school, planned actually to be a college professor. And so I kind of went a little bit different route. But life took me in other directions. Didn't go back for my graduate degree, just did my undergrad, and then worked at a design firm, an ad agency. Then I was at McGraw-Hill as an editor, and it just sort of slowly progressed from there. And I started working for a company that did a lot of e-learning, and I basically took on the role of instructional designer and have in the last 12, 15 years been perfecting my skills as an instructional designer and going through different courses and certifications and things like that. So
That's awesome. So you've been in this space for, 15 plus years?
Yeah, I know.
That's
What
awesome.
I was thinking about the year, and I'm like,
I know.
So I started at McGraw-Hill in 2007, which would be where I would say I started in the space of adult learning, even though there I was working on elementary. But that's where I would say I started my path as an instructional designer, where you start to understand how a person learns. And so I learned that first with kids, honestly, with elementary age, and then took what I learned there, combined it with the creative side that I'd gotten at the ad agency and the design firm, and kind of merged that together to work in adult learning and do that e-learning side of it with that company back in. So I went there in 2009. So yeah, I've been doing it like 15 years, 15 plus years. Yeah, that's crazy when I think about that.
Yeah, we're not 15. We haven't been in the industry 15 years, let alone being able to work at this, the same area for 15 years.
I know, it's kind of crazy.
So,
Within your experience, how important would you say mentorship has been for you with getting to where you are today?
Huge. I don't think I'd be where I am today if I didn't have a lot of people encouraging me to do it, both men and women both. I think I had a lot of male mentors early on, just because of the industry I was in and who was in those positions. So it's very interesting. It's only been the last, I would say, 5-ish years where I feel like I've started to interact with a lot of other female business owners and realize that some of the things that I faced and some of the hurdles I faced in mentorship, and not that, no offense to men out there, not that they gave me the wrong advice, but they just had different challenges than what I had.
Yeah.
And so they would give me advice to deal with the situation a certain way. And it wasn't received the same way coming from me that it would be from them. So in the last 5 years, as I've gotten advice from women, I have found that I need to approach certain conversations a little differently, just because there are some perceptions that go there. And some of that has to do with just as women, we're empathetic and sympathetic and maybe a little less to the point, just by nature. It's not always true, but by nature. So the conversations just take a different tone. I don't know how else to put that.
I'd love to spend a little bit more time on that. I've been in the industry now 20 plus years, and I've definitely seen a shift in just how industry works and interacts between male and female employees, all for the positive, although we're not at the finish line yet. But I'd love to kind of talk through, some of the early challenges that, because, we do see the world differently between men and women, and our shared experiences are shared, but still unique to ourselves. I'd love to just talk a little bit more about some of those hurdles that you had that are now, when we look at someone like a Megan or some other coworkers that are early in their career, things that were beyond areas that used to be like, maybe sticking points for women in the workplace, but now we've culturally moved beyond those. If you have any ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, I'll give an example from about 10-ish, I can't remember what year it was, so 14, 15, 2014, 2015. I was overseas meeting with a group of colleagues, and we're sitting in a conference room. I'm the only woman in the conference room with a bunch of male executives, and I was overseas. Keep that in mind. So I had two counterparts that were both men from the U.S. sitting next to me, and even though there were questions in that meeting that should have clearly been directed at me, they were directed at the men sitting next to me. And it was very obvious based on my role and who I was that
Mhm.
those questions should have gone to me. Because right away, those two counterparts turned to me and said, Desiree, can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
So, you saw that. And that was a little bit of a cultural difference because I will say, so we were there for, I don't know, probably a week. By the end of the week, I saw a difference. I mean, and I
That's
think of
awesome.
people being more aware. I think there were
Hmm.
cultural differences, so that was part of it. But then also being aware that they caught on to that as soon as the men in that room, because that's where mentorship kind of came into play there too, where those two men who are my counterparts supported me and didn't let anyone treat me that way, I guess. They made sure
Yeah.
that everyone knew who I was and what my role was, and these questions should be directed to me. And I think, and it was well received. I don't think it was ever awkward. I don't think it was ever, there wasn't any animosity or anything. I think it was just a learning experience for a lot of people in that room. So it was a good thing.
And I agree. There's been so many examples, in my personal and professional experience where people would default to me because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a loud, outgoing, strong personality, but I'm not a subject matter expert. And a lot of times I have strong women around me
Mm-hmm.
that somebody asked me a question like, Megan, what do you want to do? Because Megan in her short time here is way better marketer than me. So if somebody were asking me a marketing question, but I do agree. I feel like a lot of those barriers are beginning to recede, if not be fully gone. And it's been because of the work that folks like you and the pioneers, over the last, really 40, 50 years to kind of keep striving towards
Yeah,
equal rights and equal representation.
for sure. And I don't feel like I experience it today like I did even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And some of that might be age too. I do wonder about that too.
Oh, okay.
Especially as I've said, I've talked to different women in the industry or
Mhm.
just in different industries. And I'm like, was I perceived that way because I was young or was I perceived that way because I was a woman or was it both? I mean, I don't know. And I probably never
Yeah.
really will know, right? It is what it is at this point. So,
Well, some of it's confidence.
for
Some of it's
sure.
your confidence as you go, and you also probably give less of a crap if they don't, like, you're going to go in there and demand the floor now too.
Right, right.
You know.
And I learned that too. Like when I was saying I was overseas sitting in that boardroom, I
Yeah.
sat back when those questions were asked to my male counterparts. I didn't jump in and answer the question. I waited for them to even say that it was okay for me to do that.
Mhm.
Today, I wouldn't do that. Today, I would just jump in and answer that question. But again, that
Yeah.
was less experience, confidence, whatever you want to call it. But I would handle it differently today. Maybe it wouldn't be as well received. I don't know, but I would handle it differently.
Yeah. Well, and before we move on to the next question, I got one more. You've kind of talked about that woman to woman mentorship, and
Mm-hmm.
that is something that I've seen really over the last 5 or 6 years here in Columbus start to
Mm-hmm.
expand. Are there any groups or any like networking ways that we can kind of that you've learned and you've leaned into outside of running clubs? I know that running clubs are the best way to network. Outside of that,
I do have a lot.
what are some
My
thoughts?
my running club is I have multiple of them, and they are my cheerleaders. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about it. So men and women both in those groups. For so there's a lot of networking groups in Columbus. Columbus is awesome about networking, and they are. I mean, you can go anywhere, anytime, and find places to network. And they're professional organizations, more casual, and it's great. Some of the ones that are focused on women, there's one called NAVO. What is it? National Association of Women Business Owners, I think is what it stands for.
Okay.
So that's a great organization. They're actually a national organization. They have a chapter here in Columbus that's very active.
Mhm.
So that's an example of one where I have met a lot of women that are just happy to have a conversation. They're not even there looking for your business. They're not looking to push you in one direction or the other. They're just there to talk to you about their experiences if you have questions. And they're a very supportive group. So that's probably one of the biggest ones that's focused on women in Columbus that I've run across. I'm trying to think if there's any others. That's
We can
probably,
toss them in at the end.
yeah, I know. I'm like, I'll think about it. But that's the big one that
Yeah.
I know that I've appreciated that. And you meet women there who are solo entrepreneurs and women who have 400 plus employees. I mean, it's a huge gamut. So you have, as you're growing your business, you have a lot of people to bounce ideas off of, and they host a lot of great events where you have a chance to mingle with people of all different like backgrounds, business sizes, etc. And so you hear a lot of different experiences, and you're exposed to stuff that, like, I've just been exposed to things going to some of their meetings that I wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to, that I just wouldn't have even thought about. So it's been a good
That's great.
experience. Yeah.
Okay, so next I kind of just want to go off of a quote that we liked from your LinkedIn.
Oh,
It says, as technology changes, we need to adapt our communication styles and educate individuals on new technologies, processes, and strategies. This is where I found I can use my skills to help others. We thought this was a great quote. Could you just elaborate a little bit on what this quote means to you?
yeah, I mean, today it's very relevant if you think about AI. When I wrote that, I wasn't thinking about AI, but today it's very relevant. That kind of comes from my background as an instructional designer. A lot of what I do is I come into a company and remember I create customized training. And that training can be on anything. It could be a software product, it could be sexual harassment, it could be onboarding training, it can be anything. So what I have found is that we're always educating people on those processes that are in a company, and the processes that are unique to that company. So it's important that, like when I started doing what I do 15 plus years ago, the courseware looked very different than it does today. The audience was very different. Technology was very different. We reached our audience in a different way. You would sit down, 15 years ago and take a 4 hour e-learning course and nobody would think twice about it. Today, if you sat down for an e-learning a 4 hour e-learning course, I mean, most of the audience
Yeah.
would have a heart attack. So it's about understanding that there's a different audience and different types of technology. So now there's other types of technology that we need to incorporate. Not only AI, but also think about, adaptive learning, which does have to do with AI, but think about the micro learnings that are out there and just being able to allow for self-guided learning and things like that. Understanding that there's technology out there that now doesn't mean we can only train these 3 ways. We can train a multitude of ways, and we need to be prepared to adapt that. And you also need to be prepared that, as an instructional designer, a lot of what I do is writing. I'm writing day in and day out, and I have to be prepared to, writing is such a big piece of communication. I have to be prepared to communicate differently based on what type of technology we're using to deliver that training, what type of technology people are receiving it in. Is it on a phone, a tablet, a computer, etc. But just being aware of the fact that there's so many things coming from so many directions that people have to absorb content in a different way, which means you have to communicate in a different way.
And it's got to be hard. You work across industry and you work
Mm-hmm.
across company types, company sizes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got to be difficult when you're going in there to help figure out the best possible way of providing the trainings. What are some of the tools and tips or tricks that you utilize in those initial meetings to kind of form the plan when you're going into, let's say, any of your clients?
Yeah, so I mean, we're industry agnostic. I mean, I've done anything from a manufacturing facility, done training in there, to software companies, to some of the larger consumer-based companies that I'm probably not supposed to name, but worked with a lot of them. So the first thing you do is you understand your audience. The first thing I do is I walk in and I try to understand who's the audience, and everything about that audience. What is their role? What do they have access to on a daily basis when it comes to technology and different types of, is it equipment like heavy duty equipment, or are they just sitting behind a computer? I mean, it's completely different. And so you have to understand your audience, understand how they're going to access the content and why they're accessing the content. So are they there because they want to be there, or are they there because they're being told that I have to check a box for compliance somewhere along the way?
Yeah.
So understanding all those pieces, that's the first thing that we'll do. The second thing we'll do is understand, why are we there? Why does this company want to create this training? Is it because they have a problem that they're trying to solve? Is it because they have to check a box for compliance somewhere? Is it because they recognize an issue and they're trying to fill a gap with training? So that's, we have to go in there and ask some of those sort of diagnostic type questions right up front, and kind of analyze the situation. Once we understand some of those things, then we can make suggestions for how to deliver the courses that they need to put together, the training, the documentation, whatever it might be.
So how has generative AI impacted your world?
Um, A lot. It's done a lot of good things. I think clients were a little bit afraid of it initially, but what we've done is we've used it to make ourselves more efficient, and we've been able to maintain costs. So what people don't realize is that while AI can do some things for you, I think a lot of times they think, oh, okay, it's going to decrease costs. Well, it's actually not decreasing costs, but it's maintaining costs because everything is going up in cost. So, for example, I use AI for audio a lot of times, and don't get me wrong, you can definitely tell when you've got robot audio in the course, but there are some really good voices out there, especially on different programs and things that you can use. You can play with the pronunciations where you can get pretty stinking close. So, but what it
Yeah.
allows us to do is instead of, re-recording the same thing 4 or 5 times, I'm just manipulating it within that tool. So it helps us so that I don't have to go back to an audio talent and re-record 5 or 6
Yeah.
times. I literally am doing it right there in the tool. So you'd be in the years past, we would have been dinged for that every single time you get charged for that. So now instead of having to charge that back to a client, we're able to maintain our costs by using tools like that. Um, the other way, same thing with like images. Like we can use it
Yeah.
to, you know, put a wheel loader in the middle of a cornfield. I mean, things that like you aren't going to find in stock photos that we could draw, but it takes us a really long time to draw it. So instead of taking the time to draw it, we can take 2 photos together, merge them together using AI, and then we can perfect it as we need to. So we're still gonna take it and manipulate it for how we need it to, but we can at least show the client a base and kind of like a comp and say, hey, are we even on the right path? Is this even where we want to be? So instead of spending 3 days doing comps, we can maybe spend a day doing comps and then take the idea that they like and perfect it. So there's a lot
I'd
of
love to
different.
talk more. Yeah, I'd love to talk a little more about the audio. I've been playing around with HeyGen. I don't know if you're familiar with that platform
Uh,
that kind of does
yeah, a little
cloning of
bit.
voices and video.
Uh-huh.
We actually created a John Sarver bot and had a little bit too much fun with it and decided to retire the John Sarver bot. But what was amazing was the fact that I only did 30 seconds of video,
Hmm.
it was able to get a full avatar of me sitting at my desk
Uh-huh.
that anyone can type any script, and it was good enough. It wasn't exactly me, but it was good enough to kind of pass that, okay, this might be fake, but it's fun to interact with.
Yeah.
So I love playing around with those kinds of tools that are out there. What are the ones that you like? I know you mentioned you probably tried a couple, and at the top of your head, if you can remember the voice tools.
The voice tool, it's like voices dot.
Syn-
No, that's the audio talent. I forget the one off the top of my head. I can give it to you after, but I can't remember it off the
yeah,
top
I'd love
of my
to.
head.
I when I think about like your world specific to from a software perspective, and we may get to this, so I apologize, Megan, if I jump ahead, but like as we're as we're building out help documentation online, or as we're building out customer support tools,
Mm-hmm.
I think Gen AI is going to play a have a huge positive in that space. Mostly because our software changes daily now. Our releases are daily.
Mm-hmm.
We're constantly modifying, especially with SaaS logic. We're modifying, we're
Mm-hmm.
improving, we're releasing to make sure that the best tools in front of the customers always. But that becomes a timing issue for people like you that are, working within software companies to build out the documentation required. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be a spot where your world will be amazingly more efficient, is to
Mm-hmm.
be able to just have the LLM bot of John be able to be go and have
Yeah.
the new content produced.
I
So I'm
mean,
excited about that.
it'll be huge. I mean, we've been doing Avatar since I think the very first time I ever worked with an Avatar it was like 2009, 2010. And I remember just getting the hands to move, like getting a hand to move up and getting the lips to sync was days worth of work, like of coding and everything that
Ah,
the developer had to do. And now, you're right. You can drop it into various tools and it'll
yeah,
animate it for you. It's really crazy.
I think the key though for the audience to remember, it's like the content still is what important. You can have
Mm-hmm.
an avatar that's got the
Mm-hmm.
coolest tech, but if you don't have a smart instructional designer
Mm-hmm.
putting in parameters and helping guide sort of the content that comes from the avatar, it's not worth anything. So
I agree. Well, and it's just like not to dog on any tools or anything, but like have you used Chat GPT and noticed any of the flaws that come out of it? You know,
oh
our
yeah.
it's like you use it, you ask it a question. The other day I just wanted to see what it would do. I actually input, I think I what did I say? The prompt was something like give me the top 2024 e-learning trends or something
Yeah.
like that. Or I think I said create a presentation on the top 2024 e-learning trends. I was just curious what it would say. I know what I think they are, but I was really
Mhm.
curious. And it did output like slide by slide, what like bullet points to put on the slide and the topics. I will say the topics that hit are pretty much on point with what I would have said as well. But when you looked at slide by slide, it was basically the same information. It
Yeah.
really didn't differentiate. It really didn't tell me the difference between the two different trends at all. So you have to look at it closely. It looks like it's outputting a lot, but it's actually outputting some fluff. So that's where I think people
Oh
are
yeah.
missing the point of it's. You can tell the difference because you can tell what it's saying and the quality of what's
Mhm.
there or not there. And
Yeah.
you can't use it for everything. You can use it to get you over some hurdles, but it's not gonna replace us necessarily in the way that some people think. I think it'll replace certain things, but there's still got to be somebody behind it doing that checks and balance.
Well, and I think the other thing that I always like to remind people of is it's the infancy of this world, and
Right.
it's only getting better every day. And this
Mhm.
is embarrassing to say, but ChatGPT's 3.5 model was smarter than me and did a better job than me. And so I've already been passed as far as like the ability to put stuff together and its speed. I agree though, but like the important thing that I like to remind people is like salespeople like myself or account managers, we hallucinate all the time. A part of what makes us good at our job is the ability to on the fly make up something that may or may not be right, just to kind of get the conversation going and to spark interest. So, I think people see those hallucinations and see them as a negative in the
Mhm.
concept of the future. And while it isn't ideal, one, I think they're going to get smaller and less impactful,
Mhm.
but also humans do it all the time.
Mhm.
So it's not that uncommon. We have this standard that our AI has to be perfect,
Mhm.
but for humans, they don't. So
Mhm.
I'm really bullish on the tech, obviously, which is a part of the reason I'm in the job that I'm in. So
Well, but I like though. I mean, like when I say that it output a presentation with 4 or 5 bullets for every topic.
yeah,
I liked the language that was there. I just didn't like that it didn't differentiate between the different ones. So
yeah,
there's like it helped me, but it helped me get over that writer's block, right? So I was going to
hmm
create a presentation anyways. I needed to talk to one of my clients about it. I knew what I kind of wanted to talk about, but I was just struggling to get over that writer's block. And so it kind of helped just get my brain thinking too. It helped me think about, okay, this is what I want to talk about. And I am
yeah,
on, like, these are the topics I want to hit. And oh, this is a good way to describe this, but this is not a good way to describe that. So you just kind of I could pick and choose what I wanted to use, how I wanted to use it, and how I wanted to build on it.
yep,
And I think that's the biggest thing, how I want to build on it, right? Almost all of these tools, almost all of the AI tools are providing some kind of a basis for us, but it's not a final output, right? It's a really great starting point in a lot of ways, which is why it's a great tool to aid us in what we're doing, but it's not the end all be all. It's not going to replace us because again, it's just going to hopefully make us more efficient, be able to do more with less.
in a couple of months we'll have you back on to do a deep dive into utilizing generative AI in your world. I could talk all day, but I know Megan's got a few more questions we want to get
I'm
through.
sure there's some other thoughts out there and
Oh, we could talk all day. It's fun.
Yeah, so just one last question from me. What would you recommend to a young and upcoming person who wants to get in your field? I mean, I just graduated college a few months ago, so if you were talking to someone in my shoes or still in college, what advice would you have to give?
um, have an have an open mind, um, to still continue to learn. I'm still learning, right? I've been in the industry. I've been doing what I do for 15 plus years, but I'm still learning every day. I'm learning every day. I'm learning new tools. I'm trying to figure out ways to be more efficient, whatever it is. But there's new topics, everything. But I think it's important to have an open mind. Just because you just came out of college, you're pretty sure you know what you want to do. That's great. Know that it may not be what you're doing in 5 or 10 years. It's not what I was doing. What I was doing the day I walked out of college is not what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
So have an open mind that you might end up doing something different, and every experience, every step, every tool is kind of building on something more and preparing you for what you're going to do. I think that a lot of people come out and they have like this tunnel vision of here's where I'm going to go, and this is exactly the path I'm going to have, and it's going to be step A, B, C, and that's not how it's going to go. So have an open mind and be okay to pivot and to embrace some of those pivots. That might be that pivot might feel way off, and it might have you way out of your comfort zone, but it could be the best step
Yeah.
for you. So embrace being uncomfortable because that's the only way you're going to learn too, right? I mean, again, I'm an instructional designer, so everything in my mind, you can learn from anything. And I'm going to tell you that, you get into those like what are called stretch zones. It's proximal learning and all that stuff. But anyways, you're gonna get into that stretch zone. So you don't want to be in the panic zone where you're like freaking out. You're never going to learn anything in that moment. But you do want to be in that spot that puts you just outside your comfort zone, because that stretch zone is when most people learn.
Kind of going on that path, what are your thoughts on acceptance of mistakes and failures and the importance of that in your career or in a career?
It's gonna happen. Know it.
Yeah.
Accept it. Embrace it. Learn from it. Try not to dwell on it.
I love that point. That's the hardest thing, is to not dwell on it. It's so easy to take mistakes home. I do think, like, and when I think about Expeed and working with Rao and team here, we almost encourage mistakes because we think that's the greatest opportunity for growth. But teaching people to not dwell on them is often hard, especially if it's client facing.
It is. And I mean, and we can all beat ourselves up over it, right? How many times have we said or done something that we just, or made a mistake, whatever it was, and we are just, you think about it for days. Just don't dwell on it. I mean, I've been there. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, where something comes up, whatever it is, and you just dwell on it. So you have to know that you're going to make mistakes. You have to go out and try not to make mistakes. I mean, the goal shouldn't be to make mistakes. You should be doing the best that you can do, but you have to know that sometimes there might be mistakes, and you have to accept it, learn from it, don't dwell on it, and just try to move past it.
I love it. Well, we're getting close to the last question. This is the last question. It's the same question we ask all of our guests. It's a loaded question, and I'm excited to meet with you in 10 years to see how right you are. But we want you to make a bold prediction for where your industry is going to be in 10 years. Like, if you were to have a statement to kind of plant your flag to revisit with me in 2034, and hopefully we'll be running a 10K somewhere in 2034, as we're on mile, 3 and we're exhausted, and I bring something up, what would it be that you think would happen in your industry in the next 10 years?
Well, first of all, I'll be yelling at you for putting me in that 10K in 10 years, because probably by then my knees are going to be shot. So we'll be arguing about that first. But I think in 10 years, so again, thinking about the bulk of what I do is in some way e-learning, right? So, I mean, we do instructor-led. That is still a piece of what companies do, but so much of it is moving to some kind of a virtual environment. I think in 10 years, there will be the John bots of the world that are sitting on a computer screen teaching people one-on-one. I think that there's going to be an AI instructor teaching people certain topics one-on-one. And that's going to be where that adaptive learning and AI kind of goes. That they're going to create an AI bot of some kind that can learn a role or a position and can turn around and train somebody, and you can have a conversation with it. That's what I think will happen.
Well, we're doing a podcast on that in the next year, because I love that statement. I think it's a great vision for your industry, and I'm excited to watch, you guys progress through from a tech enablement standpoint to an execution standpoint. It's going to be fun. So
well, and now,
that brings us.
That brings up the point, though. I now need Expeed to build that. So
that's why we're here.
You just had to make that for me, so I'll turn around, I'll sell it, you make it.
That's what we love to hear. Leanne's taking a note right now. That does bring us to the end, though. Desiree, thank you so much for hopping on and having this conversation with Megan and I on our podcast. We've learned so much today from you. We appreciate your insights. We appreciate your thoughts. So thank you for joining us. For those of you at home, as always, please feel free to send us any questions at technicallyspeakingexpeed@gmail.com. We'll be sure to include them in any conversations we have moving forward, as well as send them over to Desiree so she can respond if anything's there. Desiree, do you have anything you want to plug before we say goodbye?
I don't. Just thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Exciting topics. So
awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us at home. We appreciate everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.